G'day, this is Kyle from Science Digital, and today I'll be taking you through an overview of the Deer platform. All right, so to start off with, this is the dashboard, which of course the first page you'll be presented with when you log in. As far as this banner is concerned, you've just got a few sort of key pieces of information. Now, the chart of accounts and account mapping refer directly to your Xero integration, which I'll be going into a little bit later on. And then, of course, you've got suppliers, products, and customers, which you've imported. Now, the method for navigation, as far as Deer is concerned, is very, very simple, just in terms of navigating over these here, and you'll get secondary drop-downs to then reference different parts of the application. You can also, from here, click on I would like to, and that will take you through to creating other parts or viewing and checking available stock. Just a couple of quick reference guides there. As far as the rest of the dashboard is concerned, you've got a couple of snapshot areas here for both purchases and sales. Pretty straightforward. And then as far as you've got, again, purchases and sales, which have a few sort of subheaders which you can check that just give you sort of recent information or just important information for what you might want to action on that particular day. And then lastly, you've got your reorder processes here. So products that are within their reorder criteria. Okay, now a really good point to make here is that there is a large amount of complexity to the Deer platform, and I'll only be going through just overviews of each sort of segment. Now, a really good point to note is that throughout the application and throughout the different areas that you're going to be using, in each area there is an eye usually located somewhere around that particular portion that will either link to an article or a video explaining the concept of that. So really, really good if you wanted to get sort of further specific information. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we'll start off with the product. So if I go to inventory and then go to add new product and service. So the idea that I'm going to sort of try and present with this is that you add something to then be able to use in other areas of the application. So just a few sort of simple things. Of course, the sort of red star means it's a required or mandatory field. So product. Okay, so another thing here, so obviously the SKU is the stock keeping unit, which is going to be essentially your barcode, but you do have another field for that, but this is going to be the unique identifier in the mandatory field. Now you've got, as far as a product type is concerned, you've got two types here. You've got a stock and a service. So stock meaning it's physical stock, service meaning it's a service product that doesn't need stock tracking. Category is anything that you can actually set yourself. Now these are, of course, are all just added by yourself, but you need to categorize a product. So I'll just add a base one from here. As far as brand is concerned, self-explanatory. The costing method here is obviously really, really important, how you'd like to go about this. There's the first in, first out. Then you can obviously use serial and batch numbers, which mean that you can add in things like expiry dates as well. So these all have their own added functionality, which you can search on the help center to sort of see exactly how those things work. Unit of measure, you need to add a unit of measure for a product. Most times I will just select item for these, but of course, yeah, it's going to help throughout the application to have this, and it's also quite good for things like weights and deliveries and that sort of thing. Okay, so then if you continue on from here, you've obviously got all of the accounts that you are going to be setting for this particular product when it is sold. Now, if you have your Xero integration set up, it means that if these are left blank, it's just going to revert to the default inventory, revenue, and COGS account these are set to. So these don't need to be set. Okay, so then you've got, of course, the stock. So status is active, so whether or not the product itself is available to sell, the active obviously means that's the case. The default location is the location or warehouse that the stock is going to be set at for this. Now, additional attributes. These are basically just extra things that you can add on a per product basis. So these can be defined in your general settings, which I'll show you later on. Minimum before reorder, obviously it's just setting a reorder quantity and setting a reorder criteria. So when the product will come up in that reorder selection on the dashboard. And then I'm selling this product, very, very simply, yes or no. Obviously the reason for that being that you can have products that are components of other products, or they're just products that you don't necessarily sell, but you still want to track. Bill of materials means that the product in question is an assembly product or a product that is derived of other products. So you can obviously set this up from here and then add your components. Similarly, once this is actually done, you can then assemble the product in production, which I'll get to later on. So the next step from here is essentially you can write obviously short and descriptions, and then of course you've got your pricing. So I can set these down here. It's pretty straightforward, and obviously you can have up to 10 different tiers of pricing if that's the case. Now, one of the design points of DIA is that you'll often find whenever you're either creating something or viewing it, you have the options of many sort of different subheaders. So obviously your dimensions for things like weight, and then of course the suppliers. Now, the products themselves don't necessarily have a supplier linked to them, with the obvious assumption that you don't necessarily always get stock from a single supplier, but you are able to add these in here so that you are able to sort of have those quick reference. Then your reorder levels again, which of course are going to be derived by these amounts, and then any discounts for the products that you've got. So that's just a very simple sort of creation of products there. Again, there is a lot of added complexity there. And I would most definitely recommend looking into costing methods and also bill of materials and that sort of thing like that. But once I save that product, basically that means that product is now available for me to then order and then purchase as well. Sorry, for me to sell and purchase. Okay, so next step is under suppliers. So if I go to, so just another point on products, sorry, if I go to inventory and view all, I can then obviously enter and view and search for products as I would. And they're going to tell me if they're active or not. And there's obviously a good way to check sort of stock on hand. You can check availability from here and then drill down as necessary. Okay, so suppliers. So again, your supplier additional process is very, very easy. Just add a supplier from here, fairly straightforward. It's essentially exactly as you would expect. And as I mentioned before, there is a tutorial button here you can just click on, which will take you to a video on how to create. Now you've got your supplier name, the currency that you're going to be using. So obviously, if you do have a multi-currency system, you are able to order products in a different currency and DIA will convert. Just keep in mind the complexity of that is that DIA itself will have a base or default currency that it will operate from. But yeah, just look into the complexity of that as well. Payment term 14 days. Now you are able to create the payment terms from the general settings page, which I'll be showing a bit later on. And then of course the accounts payable, which is again linked to your Xero account, and then your tax rule. So again, these taxes are pulled in from Xero directly. Okay, cool. Now, as far as addresses are concerned, you can add yourself an address for that particular supplier and then make it a default. And then the same with contacts. So it can have multiple addresses and multiple contacts, and then you can set a default for that specific supplier. Once I create that supplier, I can then, of course, use the purchasing module to create a purchase order. Actually, before I get into that, let me just go to customers very quickly. The customer creation module is very, very similar to the supplier. There's just a few sort of added fields, obviously choosing which sales account is going to be added to. And then the addresses and contacts is the same mechanically as a supplier. Okay, so as far as orders are concerned, we're going to go into, actually, no, first thing I'll actually jump into just before we do that is the accounting integration itself. Okay, so when you first set up your DIA trial account, it will actually prompt you right at that particular point whether or not you want to link your Xero account to that, in which case it will immediately set up a link and sync or do all the initial sync, whether that be obviously your contacts in Xero, your suppliers and customers, and then also any of your accounts as well that are going to be initially synced. So this will come all the way through from here. I mean, fairly simple in terms of the initial setup. The main thing to really note is if you go into reference books and then you go into your chart of accounts and account mapping, your chart of accounts in there is obviously going to be pulled directly from Xero, and you can load these from Xero to recheck if you make changes after the fact. Alternatively, you can see your account mapping from here, which is again all accounts that are pulled from zero. So there you go. Alrighty. So let's go back to the purchasing suite. So let's go and create. So before we actually do that, just one thing I'd like to go into is the general settings. So again, there's a lot you can customize as far as the general settings are concerned. Of course, you can just sort of have a quick sort of flick through this. But things like pricing tiers for products, things like the sale order number formats, all these sorts of things you can go on and adjust and customize based on your business requirements. Things like or like if you're quoting, if you want to skip these by default, if you want to have manual pick, pack, and ship, all the sort of stuff you can add from here, which I'll go into further as well. Okay, now we'll go into, sorry, the last thing I wanted to cover off was obviously user permissions is fairly straightforward, and then the document templates. So user permissions is just what you'd expect, being able to add in a specific user, whether they're a master user or not, and what specific permissions they have. So I can actually go through and choose what a specific user has access to at any given point in time. And then lastly, in the general settings is the document templates. So of course, this is going to be all of your invoice templates for sales, purchases, whatever it may be. And you can obviously go in, like most sort of invoicing systems, it's all based on invoice templates in Word using merge fields, which of course you can link to from here. Okay, so let's create a new purchase order. As far as this is concerned, it is again very, very similar to the sort of product creation in terms of its view. The DIA is really, really good at having a very unified view. Again, if you want to go through a tutorial process for getting into specifics of creating purchase orders, you can do so from here. Now, obviously, you can add a supplier from a list. All right. Cool. Okay, so I can select that. Now, of course, once you've got all this information here, you can obviously add a supplier at this point if you wish to, but any supplier that you add from this point is going to auto-fill all this information here. And then, of course, you have an option to, depending on how you'd like to go about, you can either invoice for the stock order first, or you can just add your stock in first. Basically, all this does is just change the order in which that you can do this. So if you stock first, you're going to receive the stock first, then invoice, or you're going to invoice first, then receive the stock. I mean, naturally, this is going to be the more common choice. Now, as far as the ordering process is concerned, it's just very simple. You select your order line. You can obviously just type in the product that you wanted to create at that particular point in time, add the quantity. Now, at this particular point in time, the base price the base price that you're purchasing the product at is not going to be available, purely because there isn't a default costing set for that particular product. So, because the way that their costs are averaged based on the orders that are processed, obviously, if I create this order and set a price, it means that the next price that's going to be autofilled the next time I order it. Again, that's added complexity, but all you need to do is just add the products and the price that you are ordering them at, and it will put everything through. It will obviously take into account the tax rules that have been set aside for this particular product and show you a total. And then as soon as you authorize this, it becomes uneditable. And then of course you can add into your like freight costs and that sort of thing from there. And then once I authorize that and go through, I can then continue along the process. So I can invoice, and then obviously I'm adding in, I can actually copy in the product from the previous order. And then if there's anything extra on the invoice at this point, I can also add those in. And then basically once I authorize that, that's all completed. Actually, there's the date field. I need to add in the numbers there. So you need to be adding in the invoice number and the invoice date. Point about the invoicing date is that you will always see that the due date will auto-fill based on the payment terms that you've got set up here as well. Now, as soon as I authorize that, that should go ahead. And then I can actually receipt the stock in. Once again, copy from invoice and authorize. So just take note of the sort of general flow, especially when you're doing a stock order in this sort of way. You're obviously just going along with subheaders from here. And then, of course, you've got the option to create a note as well. But that gives you a basic overview of purchase orders. The next is sale orders. So similar sort of concept here. You're going to be adding in a customer. Nope. Okay, so I'm pretty sure. Okay, we'll just do that. We'll just set the first one. Okay, so once again, whenever you add in a customer on a sales order, you are going to be able to get everything auto-filling from that point. Similar with your payment terms as well. Obviously, if there aren't any payment terms for that customer set, they'll go to the default ones. The other thing you'll need here is a sales representative. And then, of course, all other information will autofill. Now, I mentioned in the general settings there was an option to skip quote. Basically, if you want to send a quote to the customer first, you can do using that. But if it's a sale that is going to be, absolutely you don't need to. Again, the process for doing this is very similar to the purchase orders. I just type in the product name. And then I simply add the quantity from there. You can see the price, of course, has pulled through based on the pricing that I had set for that specific tier. Now, once I have gone through that process, I can authorize this. Same each one again. Once you authorize, it will essentially lock that specific part of the sale order. I go to pick. Obviously, I'm picking a specific product from a location. Obviously, if I have batch or serial numbers set, then I'll be able to include those, and then an expiry date. Obviously, if they're not applicable in this case, it's fine. You can also scan them in too. Once I authorize that that's correct and that's the correct location, that's no worries. Pack, of course, is done automatically because we've set this up to do so. And then shipping, of course, we can autofill based on that too. So all done. Once it's authorized, we can then send off an invoice and authorize. We do the same thing again, add an invoice number and a due date. Oh, that wasn't quite what I had in mind. Let's try that again. Okay, brilliant. Done. We now have an invoice and that's all due and set. So now that sale is pretty much all done, and we can no longer change any other parts of this. And then of course we can credit if need be. But again, following along that very sort of very methodical process in terms of that, and it obviously locks at each point, so it's good to know. And there's that tutorial button again if you wanted to go through that in detail from a tutorial perspective. Okay, so that is essentially the process from there. Now, in both cases with orders and sales, you can have a view all process, and of course it's very, very good in terms of an infographic showing you whether or not an order has been received and then billed. So you'll see up here, these are a nice little sort of icons in terms of showing you at what point the invoice is at. Obviously the red meaning that it's been received but not paid, and things like that. So the same sort of view you'll get when you're viewing sale orders. If you go to here, you can then sort of see at which point each sale is at. So whether it's been fulfilled, and then obviously shipped, and then last one, we're just waiting for payment. Now, actually, one thing I did not show, which I'll go to this invoice that we're sort of going for through here, is that if we are going to the invoice stage and we're expecting payment, now I can go down to here and just add the account, obviously in zero, that I want this to be paid to, and then date paid and the amount. So good point to note at this particular point is that you've got you can add payments to sales orders in this way. Alternatively, if you do have a zero account and they've paid the invoice in zero, when you do a sync with your zero account, it will actually pull those payments from zero to dir. Okay, so that's essentially it as far as the sales orders are concerned. Now, one thing I will touch on is production. Now, as far as when you saw before when I was creating that product, there was the products that essentially were a bill of materials. Now, so a product that is made up of other smaller components. So an assembly is essentially a product that is created as a result of that. So you're going through an entire process of creating an assembly for that product. So basically allocating inventory. So you can add your component lines, add your products, and they'll go through that whole entire process. Now, this is something that it can be manually done, but it can also be set to a product with product that is made up of other products or components can be set to automatically assemble either when you sell this particular product. So it's a good point to note. And of course, you can disassemble those exact same products again. So, but just the opposite, really breaking a product down into its component pieces. Issues to production. Now, as far as these are concerned, this is for writing off wastage and also basically writing off stock service costs for the job aspect as well. And jobs is when you're essentially outsourcing manufacturing work too. Now, from the financials page, you've got receive and spend money. Now, these are basically just costs that you would incur that don't necessarily have bills or purchases or sales against them. But naturally, you would do this in your accounting platform anyway. DIA just gives you the option to have this there as well. All right, we've got the reporting base here, which is of course quite robust in terms of what you can report. You can very simply sort of add in your products your reports that you would like to review the most. So of course, just by clicking the star is essentially how you would go about doing that. You refresh and it comes up there. Now you can, when you're viewing any particular report, DIA does give you the ability to drill down specifically on certain types of headers. So if I wanted to look into, for example, the product SKU, I can just simply drag and drop the headers as I would like, and then I can order them as well. So quite robust in terms of what you can do and the level of drill down you get from that. Okay, so that's very, very quick overview of reports. And then lastly, we're looking at the integrations page. So DIA does support quite a large amount of different integrations. Like I've said, we've got Xero as the main accounting integration. B2B portal being their DIA's own sort of e-commerce, of course, your third-party API integrations. You've got a couple of point-of-sale options as far as you've got DIA's own sort of inbuilt one, or you can link to Vend. You've got your payment processes, which are both Stripe and PayPal. Then you've got your CRM, which is Salpo, Handshake, and also the last one was the CRM, so Capsule CRM. And then of course just a few of them there. So you've got quite a lot of option in terms of what you can link to DIA as well in that vein. Okay, so that is a basic run through of the DIA platform. Again, as I've mentioned before, there's a really good sets of get started guides, and throughout the application there's those tutorial buttons you can use to drill down and get more specific information. I hope this was helpful. Cheers.